It's the middle of winter and everything is dead. So let's talk about dead stuff. Let's talk about the history of poison. For this video, I'm only going to be focusing on poisons that are derived from food or were mixed into food with the deliberate intention of poisoning somebody, and not, say, poisons that were mixed into food with other intentions, like in the Victorian era when they would add formaldehyde to milk in order to slow down the curdling process. Poison has been around for millennia. We have texts from all over the world talking about different ways in which the ancient people used to poison their enemies, from Hindu texts to ancient Greek texts instructing people to use the hellebore flower in the water of their enemies, to an ancient Chinese text in the 2nd century BC, which advocated for the burning of toxic vegetables to create a noxious gas. When people think of toxic foods, the first one that comes to mind is usually mushrooms, and there are good reasons for thinking that. There are plenty of different varieties of poisonous mushrooms, and plenty of people who have died from them. For example, Emperor Claudius. His wife Agrippina poisoned him with a dish of mushrooms. It didn't work, so she poisoned him again a couple hours later, and that one stuck, but still, the attempt was made. Now, in reality, there are very few deaths that come from mushroom poisoning, and almost all of them come from just one specific variety of mushroom, the death cap mushroom. The popularity of poisoning led to some rulers around the world creating their own poison gardens. Now, these are gardens that were exclusively used to grow the plants, herbs, berries, and mushrooms that could be used to kill people. And if you're thinking, wow, I really wish I could go see one of those today, good news, you can. There's one in England. It's called Alnwick Castle. Now, by the 12th century, it actually began to change the way that royal dishes were cooked. A man named Maimonides was a Jewish scholar and physician working for the Sultan of Egypt and Syria in the early 1100s. Now, he advised that the king avoid all foods that were cooked with onions or garlic, as well as anything that was obviously sour, bitter, or strongly flavored. His theory was that these strong ingredients and strong flavors would easily mask the smell and the taste of poison, making it easier for people to slip poison into the sultan's food. Okay, so all of that is good and well if you're just trying to knock off one person, but what happens if you want to take out a bunch of people at once, like, say, 3 legions of Roman soldiers in one go? Well, for that you need something a little bit different, like honey. Yeah, surprisingly enough, this actually worked. There's a variety of honey called mad honey, which is made by bees who have been feeding on a particularly poisonous type of rhododendron that grows along the edge of the Black Sea. Now, the enemy soldiers knew that and placed lots of honeycombs full of mad honey in the path of the Roman soldiers. The Romans fell for it, and all of them went nuts. Some of them even died. Works like a charm. The best people at creating any kind of poison was, of course, the Borgias, the medieval dynasty out of Italy. Now, the Borgias had their own special family recipe for poison, cantareia, which they passed on from generation to generation. The Borgias produced poison in their cellars with the same care and attention they gave to their wines. And to them, every poison that was a good poison had to have 5 characteristics. It had to be reliable, effective, deceptive, slow-acting, and strong enough to kill. And the way they got all 5 of those in one poison was through something called alkaloids of putrefaction, which basically means they took plants that were already toxic and let them rot to get even more toxic. Sometimes they would also feed that toxic stuff to an animal, like a pig, and let it foam at the mouth, and then collect the foam of the animal that had just been poisoned and add that into the mix. Italians are fun. Of course, there are also foods that get a bad rap for being poisonous when they really aren't, and the most famous of these is, naturally, the tomato. In the 1590s, an English herbalist named John Gerard classified the tomato as a version of deadly nightshade and said that they were poisonous, even though in the exact same treatise he admitted that there were plenty of humans, not just in America, but also in the southern part of Europe, that were already eating them with no ill effects. When the potato was first introduced to Spain in 1570, Europeans were immediately distrustful of it. They thought it was ugly and lumpy and misshapen, and because of that, they linked it to leprosy and syphilis. And that kind of thinking proceeded for hundreds of years. In fact, in 1774, the German peasants were facing a famine. So King Frederick the Great sent over hundreds of pounds of potatoes for the peasants to eat, and they refused. All right, die then. But there's still one poisonous food that even some of today's most powerful leaders can't eat. That is fugu, the Japanese blowfish. The Emperor of Japan is actually forbidden by law from eating fugu for his own safety. Now, archaeologists have found evidence of people in Japan eating fugu from at least 2,300 years ago. And from the period then until now, it's gone in and out of legality a couple of times. It was banned because so many people were getting sick and dying from it, but then it was brought back again and again because apparently the taste is just so good.